Welcome to the Political Hot Seat. I'm your host, Manny. Today, we have the privilege of having in the hot seat Ms. Thearse McCalmon, who is a candidate for the 49th Senatorial District in New York State. She's running against a Republican incumbent, Jim Tedisco.
My name is Thearse McCalmon. I'm an educator, historian, mother, and grandmother.
Ms. McCalmon, thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us why you're running and why do you think you are the best person to lead that district?
Well, I'll tell you what I've been telling everyone. I'm running because there is a desperate need in my community and the district for a leader who has actually experienced the struggles of real life, like the majority of the people in the district. I'm running because Black lives matter, and so do brown lives. We currently have an antiquated septuagenarian career politician who has lost all relevant connection to what is actually of importance to the people, the youth, and the community as a whole. He lacks vision of what matters to real folk like you and I. And people like you and I are what's important. We're what matters. And he's totally forgotten that. We've been fighting all of our lives and our parents before us to get these career politicians to see that they are there for us and not for their own selfish goals, not to be bought out by big businesses, nor to kill us slowly while defunding our education and our Medicare. I'm running because we need healthcare for all now, yesterday and last week. I'm running because I have always known who the essential workers are and that they deserve not only a living wage, but a proud wage, one that matches their superhero jobs.
Now, Ms. McCalmon, I want to talk to you specifically about that. On your platform, you said you support $15 minimum wage for workers in New York.
Yep.
The question is, why not $20? Why not $25? I mean,
I actually wanted to go up to 17, especially during this pandemic. So most of our economics, obviously, our revenue has been pretty much destroyed in New York State because of the pandemic. We have millions of people out of work. And our governor, he is stuck between a rock and a hard place of how to make up for that loss. We're not getting the money that we want or need from the current president, from the federal government. It has not come down to New York. So when you ask why not raise it to like $20 and all, we even though I want this to be, we still have to be smart. We can't just go crazy and say, okay, let's do $20, $25. We have to do what we can. We can right now do $15. We can probably go as much as $17, but we have to be smart about it. So in the future, yes, possibly we can do $20. And understand the cost of living has continuously gone up, but minimum wage has not matched that growth at all. Cost of living keeps going up and our minimum wage creeps slowly behind. It's not livable at all.
Now, Andrew Young, who was running for president, endorsed you, and that was a great endorsement for you. He's from Schenectady. Now, did he endorse you because of your position on universal basic income?
Part of it. Yes, definitely. The other part was he asked me if I agreed with having a people-centered campaign. And I'm like, I've always had, before we got started, we were talking about that. I ran for mayor last year. I made sure that I didn't just go to the regular voters who always vote in primaries or voted in the last presidential primary. I made sure that I went to those people who don't go out to the polls, and they have very legitimate reasons for why they don't. Their voices have been ignored. So my campaign last year was focused mostly on the people and what they wanted. I didn't go to them and say, this is what our issues are. aren't I smart? Aren't I great? I know what's wrong and I'm going to fix it. So you should vote for me. No, I went and said, okay, I think I know what's going on, but I would prefer that you tell me what you feel you need. And then I'm going to scream that from the mountaintops. So my campaigns have always been people-centered. So when he came and asked me, would you be willing to, I said, but I'm already doing it. And he was like, oh, great. It's just how it is. As an educator, I've always as well centered my lessons on my students, because I will know better how to teach to them if I understand what they need, if that makes sense. And it's the same as a politician. We oftentimes have people coming here and telling us what they think is best for us, and 99% of the time they get it wrong. And that's why a lot of people are like, my vote doesn't matter. No one's listening. So I made sure that I didn't make that same mistake. I went to the people, and that's how I almost won. And against an 8-year incumbent, I only lost by 105 some odd votes.
Yeah, I saw an interview where you said that was the best defeat you ever had.
Yes, it was the best loss. Oh yes, it was great. Unfortunately, that has been the argument since minimum wage was like $2 an hour. Have we seen that happen? No. If anything, it opens up the market even more. It makes more jobs available. And raising minimum wage is not the threat to employment. It is not the threat to jobs. The threat to jobs is actually technology. We're moving towards a more robot-centered, AI-centered workforce. That's what's costing jobs, not minimum wage increases. This, unfortunately, has been the same rhetoric over and over again by big businesses, because they want to keep their pockets fat and heavy and keep us where we are, stagnant as workers. So we can't grow. And we know this. We know this as regular working people. Why can't we just afford to live? If big businesses treated their employees how they treat their pockets, we all would be on a level playing ground, and we wouldn't be sitting here talking about, minimum wage increases is going to cost jobs. We wouldn't have this conversation. Not at all. I think that it is the best answer to getting all of Americans on their feet, period. Even before, and Andrew Yang proposed this during his presidential run, and even before this, before he ran for president. So he didn't foresee the pandemic. He didn't foresee that we were actually going to be given a $1,200 stimulus check, which is not enough. It was not enough. I mean, we only got it once anyway. He didn't foresee it, but he saw that the trends in how we treat regular people financially, economically, because it's that socioeconomic segregation. He saw where it was going, and it was destruction for all of us around. We saw it during this pandemic. If we do not support our working class and our lower classes, even our mixed income folk, we will come to a standstill. And we saw that here. They had no choice but to give that test run, that's what I like to call it, of that stimulus, to help support them. Because if you don't support your foundation, everything will crumble. So going forward, I think that a UBI, and I actually, the amount I disagree with, I don't disagree, but I think it should be more. But I do agree with Yang that we should start at like 1,000 and then work our way up to like about 2,000 a month, and then figuring that out. But I think that this should be something that should be normal. Every month, every citizen gets this basic income, because what it will do is give us more financial security. It'll free us up from so many things, including domestic violence will be decreased, mental health issues will be decreased, child abandonment, a whole bunch of different things will be addressed, simply because people will have more secure, will feel more secure financially.
Economically, yeah.
So will this be the end all and be all to our soon to be like financial crash? No, but if this was already in place, it wouldn't have been a question whether we would have survived the pandemic financially or not.
Now, Ms. McCalmon, in your platform, you said you support universal basic income, and actually stated that Wall Street should pay for it. How are you going to get Wall Street to pay for it?
Well, it's stock transfer tax. And also we need to increase the taxes on wealthier New Yorkers. And it's not a new thing. This is not a new thing. When we needed to get out of the Depression in the 30s, that's what we did. Most wealthy people were like, yeah, it's my patriotic duty to take care of my country. And they took it on as like, yes, go ahead, tax me. I'm going to keep making money. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm already here. Go ahead, tax me. It's pretty much nothing off their back. Some of them did argue with that, but look what happened. It got us on our feet besides the other programs that were established during that time to get people working. But other than that, we taxed like 73% of billionaire income. And that helped get us out of that. So this is not nothing new. This is not nothing that we have never done before. We know how to get out of this financial crisis. For the life of me, I can't understand why we keep going back to cutting education, cutting healthcare, cutting the basic needs that all human beings need. Why would you defund those things? It makes no sense. We know where we need to go to get out of our financial crisis, but for some reason, greed seems to supersede humanity.
Well, let me move to another issue. I believe in 2006, you were assaulted by a police officer in front of your own house.
Yes.
And I saw a prior interview you made where you talk about defunding the police. Now, defunding the police can mean a whole host of things.
No.
So do you support defunding the police? And if you do, where do you want to put that money?
Defunding the police means exactly what it is. It's funny because if we were to put defund in front of any other word, like let's defund education, we know exactly what that means. It means that we're cutting that budget. When we say defund Planned Parenthood, we know exactly what it means. We're cutting what it means. It's cutting their budget. When we say defund healthcare, we know exactly what that means. It means we're cutting that budget. We are making them more self-reliant and learn how to spend their money on things that they actually need than spending money on things that they don't need. So when we put it in front of police, all of a sudden everyone's like, that means they don't want police. That means we hate police. That means that we don't need them. No, it means exactly what it means. We need to cut their budget. We need to stop giving them money to militarize, buy tanks, to buy bullets all the time. Why are we militarizing our police force? Why? Who are they going to war against? Their jobs are to protect and serve the people in their community. So why are we gearing them up for war? It doesn't make any sense. So it's funny when people hear defund and then police follow that. They're all like, oh, no. No, it means that we are no longer going to pay for them to militarize the police. If you want money or if you want an increase for your police force, then you need to itemize it. I mean, just think of it. If anybody wants to borrow money from you, what do you need it for? We need to know exactly what you need it for. So if you're looking to militarize instead of to train properly, then you're not getting money. We need to defund police and refund our schools, our hospitals, our social workers. That's what we need to put our money into, the foundation of our communities. That's what we need to do.
But what do you say to critics and other people who say that taking money from the police will increase crime, especially?
I say it's racist. I say it's racist because right now the people who are screaming loud from the mountaintop that they need to defund the police are mostly Black and brown folk and their white allies, because the Black and brown and poor communities are the ones that are being over-policed. We're being over-policed. And we're saying we want to we don't need them in our neighborhoods. So when people say, oh my gosh, that means it's going to increase crime. So what you're saying, is that Black and brown and poor folk are the ones that cause the crime all the time. So we can't get rid of the police, or in their mind, because it doesn't mean get rid of the police, but that's how they see it. So don't get rid of the police, because if you get rid of the police, then Black folk are going to go crazy and start rioting and looting, and it's just going to be anarchy. And poor folk are going to be taking over the place and coming to your suburbs and destroying things. Like, it's totally racist. We can live without the absolute presence of police every single day in our neighborhoods. Hello, we do it every day in the suburbs. We do it every day out in the country where people live miles apart from each other. They don't see the police all the time patrolling their streets, and their crime.
McCalmon, let me ask you this question. Let's be very honest here, right? Most of the crime that we know of, that we suffer from or been victim of, those crimes, most of the time, they are committed in poor neighborhood of color. I mean, don't you need the police to protect?
No. The crime that's being reported most of the time is the crime that's happening in poor neighborhoods of color. And that's where we get the lie that there's Black on Black crime. When we see serial killers, when we see school shooters, and they're usually shooting up white schools, when we see that, they don't say, oh, look at this, another case of white on white crime. No, that's ridiculous. It's nonsensical rhetoric. It is not only in Black and brown communities, and it is not only in poor communities. Crime is happening everywhere in every community. I live in a very residential, middle class to upper class, middle upper class neighborhood. And we have crime here too, but it doesn't get reported all over the place. It doesn't. And I remember calling and asking, why is it when I call the police over here, it takes forever for you guys to come? And they said, well, because your call rate or something like that is down. And I was like, yeah, but you take forever to come. So most people just hide in their houses, watch the crime happen, and it never gets reported. But we have crime all over, everywhere, in every city. It's just that for some reason, well, I know what the reason is, we tend to focus on those poor neighborhoods. Oh, maybe it's because they're uneducated or undereducated. It's because they're poor, so they have to steal all the time. Well, then if that's the case, give them a UBI and we won't have this issue. I 100% agree, and that's exactly what defund the police means. Defund the police and stop putting them in these situations where they're not properly trained to be in those situations, and actually fund the programs that are actually, so social workers, caseworkers in school, crisis response persons. That's what we need to do, not police officers. So if 911 gets a call in regards to some maybe an autistic adult or something like that is having a crisis moment, we don't have people to respond to that. We don't have a mobile unit of crisis workers to respond to that. So we send the police. What the police are there, like, this is a criminal element, this is violence. So they're trained to react to violence with violence, right? Most of the time they do not first enact their de-escalation, not for the most part. Some of them do, some of them don't. But the de-escalation comes like way after, when the person has already been injured by the police officer, shot, or even killed. Then they're like, oh, okay, so I didn't realize this was a mental issue, because that's not your training. So yes, instead of increasing funding to put more police officers in places where they definitely do not belong, especially schools, we need to get SROs out of schools. We do not need them there. We need to actually start funding and start a crisis response system. That's what we need. And start funding our nurses in the school, our teachers, our educators, our psychologists. That's what we need in our schools and in all of these different places, not police officers. No. And this is, and you mentioned that that's where that friction comes in, because the police officers are coming in as enforcers, not supporters, not someone who's coming to make the situation better, because when people see police officers, we know that the situation has gotten so bad that now we have a police officer, there's a chance that you may get locked up. You may become a criminal. So the situation has gotten that bad, there's a police officer there. Like, and it's not gonna get any better. So of course the friction is there. So defunding would actually solve a lot of these issues and build a better community between police and the people that they're supposed to be policing.
Now, are you planning, and if you win, are you planning on introducing legislation that address police defunding police in school? Because as a senator, you, as a New York State senator, this is something you can do. Are you planning on doing that?
Oh, yes, definitely. One of the committees that I would like to be on is the Education Committee, and I will be proposing things through the education law for this, definitely. And as an educator, I mean, it's kind of makes sense, but yeah, it's one of the.
Now, let's talk very briefly about housing. New York State has a serious housing problem. You have to do with developers sometimes refuse to develop certain pieces of land because of the requirement that they have to make certain housing available. The state can do a lot through the New York Assembly to the state Senate. Now, if you win your position, and I know I looked at your the 49th senatorial district, which covers Schenectady, Clinton, and 2 or 3 other locations. What are you planning to do to make sure that the people in the 49th district can have fair housing where they could live, you know, in a decent place? What are you proposing? What are your solutions?
So that's a big picture, right? Because part of that is increasing minimum wage so people can actually afford to live where they live, instituting a UBI, and also when developers want to come into a community and they want to invest, the first thing we need to do above all things is go to the people and say, we see you have a need for affordable housing and housing you could be proud to come home to. And we would like to develop, but we want to make sure that what we're doing is what you need. So having a conversation with the community, bringing them to the table or going to where they're at and saying, this space right here, we're thinking about doing this. Does that work for you? When we do that, then not only are we investing or reinvesting in those communities that have been disinvested in and disenfranchised, but we are keeping their voice in that. So that when we get those housing projects and we get developers in there, the people have already spoken of exactly what they need, how much they can afford, not through like statistics and research and all that stuff. Yeah, that works. But making sure that the people say, yeah, I can afford $800 for a 3-bedroom, but I can't afford any more, you know, or I have Section 8, and yes, as long as the housing accepts that, then I can do that. You know, just making sure that the people's voice is #1 and centered in those developments, raising minimum wage, giving a UBI, and making sure that when developers come in there, no matter what it is, whether it's a mixed use building or not, that the community benefits from every single thing that is done in it. It's the only way that we can actually combat this housing issue. The people's voices are not being heard. We have to center their voices. That is actually a whole part of the community benefits package. If you're coming, if there is a property or properties for sale that have been in disuse and they're just an eyesore in the community, the city needs to take over it and offer it to the people with options either to rent, buy, or build on, and also making sure that they have banking institutions that are offering low interest rates, low with no money down, anything that would encourage and support the current community members to invest in themselves and their own community. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It has to happen. And yes, more than likely that will be one of the few legislations that I'll be drafting up.
Perfect. One question, healthcare. Now, at the earliest part of the pandemic, I believe that you are the first person to set up a website so where everything can be centralized,
Yep.
where people from your community and perhaps other community can get information about things that they need help. Now, what is your position on healthcare? Because we know that a lot of people are going without healthcare, especially right now in the middle of the pandemic. What are you going to do as a senator to ensure that people have access to healthcare? At least people in your district.
Firstly, thank you for recognizing that. We were one of the first people to actually set up a COVID, even before the governor. We had a COVID resource page on our website, and thank you for recognizing that. I know that you're probably aware of the New York Health Act. It's been sitting in committee for forever and forever, and actually the incumbent is part of this committee as well, and it has not moved. I understand that it is not perfect, and a lot of people are terrified of it, and they're trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it, especially after this pandemic. And I know that now, especially after this pandemic, it's going to be harder to convince people where we can get the funding from to pay for this. But that will be one of my number one tasks, is to get the New York Health Act passed. We have to, and that's what I said. We need healthcare for all now, yesterday, last year. We needed it 20 years ago. It needs to happen. So I am going to be working, especially my first 2 years. This is going to be what I'm going to make sure passes, because when we pass this, that actually is going to help support infrastructure even more in most of the municipalities that are struggling financially. And this will free up a lot more money, a lot more taxes to build up that infrastructure and reinvest in communities that have been decimated for over decades from this investment. The New York Health Act is one of the number one things that will help free up a lot of money and funds and make municipalities much more flexible in supporting their communities. So yes.
Well, listen, part of the reason why this act has been sitting there is because the Democrat, obviously from your party, have not been able to reach an agreement with the Republicans.
Yep.
Now you've got 63 senators.
Yep.
The majority Democrats, but we need the Republican area to move things along.
Yep.
But what are you planning to do? Because it seems to me politics have been so divisive that even when something is going to help people, politicians play game with it so
Yep.
that they can blame each other. What kind of politicians are you going to be? Are you going to be the type of politician who blame each other, or are you going to be the type of politician who reach across the aisle to actually make things happen for people?
Yeah, actually, when I did my primary, I was called out for working with Republicans in the past. And even though I didn't really, I met with one Republican, but I was called out for actually, working with someone who was not a Democrat. And I said, it doesn't make any sense. It's like that segregation of black and white folk. Now we've got Republicans and Democrats, and we can't get anything done. And who's being hurt? While they're being paid and they can go home to their families and have a full fridge and they don't have to worry about health insurance, the rest of us regular people are like, why can't we get anything done? So, and I'm going to repeat your words. Let's get real here, right? We're out here saying, yes, we can do this and that should be done, that should be done. But coming from working in the Senate with one of the best senators out there, Senator Neil Breslin, and watching how everything does, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that has to be addressed. And being on this side and not being on that side anymore, I know that there are other things, especially meeting with other senators, Republicans, and some Democrats aren't for it as well, and trying to figure out where the stopping point is for them, where they just don't want to budge, and work with that. I don't know what that is right now because I'm not in there yet. But once I get in there, that's what it's going to take, probably a year or maybe 2 years before we can actually get this moving, especially because of the pandemic. So funding is like really scarce right now. But we really need to find out what's the sticking point. What exactly is the issue? Is it because Democrats are supporting this so Republicans don't want to? Or is it because it's maybe one Republican that's not sure, or that maybe something in the language needs to be changed? We don't know on the outside. I can sit here and say, oh, this is how to fix it. I may be wrong once I get in there. But I know that when I get in there, that's going to be my goal, and they need to watch out because I'm coming.
I'm glad you say that, because I don't know if you're aware, but there is a buzz on the internet that you are the next AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and certainly paying attention to the leadership, to your leaders in the Senate is important.
Yes.
So what do you say to people who say that you are the next AOC?
I own it. I used to live in the Bronx. Hey, if that helps them to understand how passionate I am and how personal this is for me, I am not that stereotypical politician. I actually hate the title, but I mean, I'm in politics, so I have to be called that. But first of all, I'm a mom, I'm a woman, and I am a grandmother, and I'm an educator. I'm an everyday person. And we're tired of the nonsense. Yes, I will be able to follow the lead of my leaders, but when I feel like the nonsense is just all right, we need to stop playing games. We are messing with people's lives. And I don't care if that makes me the crazy looking one or the aggressive one. I don't care. My constituents deserve better, and I'm gonna fight like hell for it. So
another question for you, Ms. McCalmon. You are an educator and you have a lot of experience in the school system. The leadership of the Democratic Party doesn't necessarily support school vouchers and school choice. Now, I could point to you many elections. For example, if we looked at what happened in Florida during the gubernatorial election, Gillum lost by 2 percentage points, and the poll shows that a lot of Black women in Florida voted for DeSantis because of his support for school vouchers. What is your position on that? Do you think that African-American mothers should be able to send their kids to the best school that gives them the best education?
That is a tough question because it's a yes, but then we don't have the issue of charter schools up here. And that's mostly my representation. So if I were in New York City, my answer may be borderline, or I may lean one way more than the other. But up here, unfortunately, we don't have that issue. And I don't like to speak on things that I'm not fully invested in or experienced with. I know that once I get in there, I will be dealing with a lot of our downstate brothers and sisters down there that in the city that actually support charter schools. And I will be open to sit and listen to their views on vouchers. And I'm okay with, you can go to whatever school you want. I feel like you should. It shouldn't be limited to what district you're in or ward or whatever. You should be able to send your child to whatever school that you wanted to go to.
I mean, in principle, you would agree that a child, especially an African American or Black child, should be able to go wherever they can a good education. Now, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that the interests of upstate and downstate constituents are different. Sometimes I've got some of my best friends in the New York State Senate. Their representation of the city is a little different than if they were representing, let's say, a district like yours. How do you plan to work with Democrats, not Republican, Democrats from downstate who have a different interest than your constituent in upstate? How do you plan to balance that interest?
Easy. I was born and raised in New York City. So I know the language, I know the talk, I know the walk. So it won't be that hard for me to imagine whatever issues they bring up and how important it is to them. I remember, I left the city when I was 16 because I came up here to go to college, but it won't be that hard for me. I don't see New York as upstate, downstate. It was really weird when I started getting into politics and I started hearing that. I was like, when the heck did we split the state? Like, it was alien to me, because being from the city and then living up here and raising my kids, all of New York is my home. I'm from, when people ask me where you're from, I'm from New York. I'm from the state of New York. That's where I'm from, number one. So it's not, my mind is not divided, how some other senators or assembly people's minds may be divided. I see us as a whole. So, and anything that we do downstate will benefit us upstate. And anything we do upstate will definitely benefit those downstate and in between and in the West. It's just, my mind doesn't work that way. So it would not be a problem or issue at all for me to work with my fellow senators in the Southern tier. It's funny and most appropriate, of course, that you bring that up. Just the other day, I participated in a Black Lives Matter march led by students from one poor school in Schenectady, New York, and then the more affluent school in Niskayuna. And even they see the disparities between funding, and we have like I think it's like 14 million, might be more than that, and foundation aid still owed to the Schenectady City School Districts. And that's one of the things on my list, that getting those funds released and getting it to our schools so we can raise the value of education for our poor Black and brown and mostly immigrant students now here in Schenectady, and actually try to figure out how we could change that tax base. And again, going back to investing in our communities, we have a lot of abandoned apartment buildings and houses here in Schenectady because the taxes are too high. So we have a lot of flight. So if we make it an incentive to purchase properties and rent to our families and communities who have been here sometimes for generations, who have chosen, like myself, to invest fully by raising their children. If we make it an incentive to purchase these properties, our tax liability actually will go down, the funding for our schools will be raised, and we can actually compete with more affluent schools. There's a lot more complicated things to go into that, but basically that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that our communities are fully invested, reinvested in, to support what we need to do for our schools. Just a lot more.
Now, let me, yesterday, I believe it was the day before yesterday, your campaign issued a press release about Joe Biden choosing Kamala Harris for vice president, for his running mate. So, and of course, Donald Trump wasted no time to call her nasty and to call her all kind of derogatory names that, that suggest a lot of things. So what do you think of the choice of Kamala Harris?
So I'll tell you first off, I have not been a fan of her policies in the past, especially with policing the Black community. I have not been a fan, but we have to get past all this bashing. Look what you did. It's not right. People make mistakes and we learn and we grow. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And we have to experience in order to learn that, right? And I'm a big proponent of that. I don't know what I don't know. And looking at Kamala and just seeing her face, it just gives hope to a lot of young women like me to see her in that position. So even though I don't agree with her past and the things she did, I'm really hopeful. I'm a humanist. I'm very hopeful that her being in this position will open her eyes to the task at hand and how she needs to change how she has done things in the past and be open to doing things more for the people, her people, all of them, the Asians and the African-American, everyone, and the entire country, because she's in a very unique historic situation right now. And she has a hard job ahead of her. And I think that that was the smartest move that Biden has ever made in his life, was to choose her.
I agree with you. I think that the Trump administration is a problem. Yeah, I totally agree with you. But have you had that experience where people treating you differently because you're a Black woman running for office?
You know the answer to that. We don't get that a lot. At least growing up, I didn't experience that a lot. So coming up to a much more rural, even though they call this the city, it is, listen, being from New York City, this is not the city, it's more suburban country to me. But being up here and living in a more suburban country type area where there's more white folk and less black and brown and, you know, and indigenous people, I started to become hyper aware of my color and my sex. And I didn't know that it would be a problem, this big of a problem for people. Even with getting employment. I'll tell you a brief story. At graduating Russell Sage College, I made it a point to know everyone that I needed to know, including the president. And because of that, she made sure that her and one of our biggest funders for the School of Education, where I got my degree from, that they, when I graduated, that they pulled me out and they wanted to take a picture with me specifically, you know, because I made sure that they knew who I was. I made sure everybody knew who I was because I had plans. So I'm on the line. They told the photographer my name, wrote it down for him. Now you guys see my name, how it's written, right? Mm-hmm. It's not easy to pronounce reading it. So he's looking at it. They pronounce it to him. It's sort of Irish Catholic. So there's a bunch of girls in front of me on the line waiting to cross the stage. There's a bunch of girls behind me. Majority of them are white. I'm probably 1 in 3 of people of color that were on that line. So he went to five people in front of me. Asked her, nope, not you. Skipped me, behind me, and he said, and he's like looking at, because we're alphabetically lined up, right? So he's like, she's got to be here somewhere. I was invisible. He did not see me. The girl was like, that's her. And then he looked at me, he goes, is this you? Yes. He goes, oh, okay. I need to know who you are because when you go on the stage, I want to take a picture. I watched him. And mind you, I knew he was looking for me. I let him struggle because that is what I have to deal with.
That is a really good example of the invisibility of not just, you know, Black people in general, but Black women. So that's the reason why I asked you how you feel about Kamala Harris, because I know that Black women have been the center, the most loyal voters of the Democratic Party, but that hasn't always been translated to power. So I'm happy that you're running. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you.
But the district, the 49th district, is not an easy district. So I want to give you the opportunity before we close to tell the voters in the 49th district why they should not re-elect Jim Tedisco, why they should vote for you.
Well, I'll be slightly inclusive with this, right? So you take a look outside, right? What do you see? You see inequality. You see human beings struggling and unemployed. Up here, we have our small dairy farmers, which is extreme, and small farmers, which are extremely important to the entire state. That's our food source. But our small dairy farmers are committing suicide because the formula for their product is not beneficial for them in any way. We see protests for Black and brown lives. We see a state without a real climate plan. We have voter suppression, so that the powers that be have control over our entire democracy. This is not the New York that I grew up knowing. And it's not the New York that I want my children to grow up in or anyone's children grow up in. New York is supposed to take care of its citizens. New York is supposed to treat everyone equally, no matter the color of their skin or where they come from. New York is supposed to shine with opportunity and lead the other states to what America is truly about. So how do we get New York back on track? It's by starting to elect the right leaders. It starts by having the common person's back. It starts by being on the front lines without political photo ops and borrowed ideas. It starts with just listening, and not just listening, but also with action and commitment. And I, Thearse McCalmon, I'm that leader. And if you vote for me, we actually will be voting for a better New York, and the New York that we know we can be.
I believe your campaign is doing an amazing job. Your campaign managers and your media people understand the concept. So I hope to talk to you again after you get sworn in as a brand new senator. So True News will keep track, and we will come back. We will hold your feet to the fire. We'll save this video so the people what promised them. Thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for checking the True News channel on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with the latest and true news happening in our world. Thank you for watching.